Welcome to OutKick Live. I'm Bobby Burack, and across from me today, Cole Cublic from radio in Birmingham and SEC ESPN commentator. Cole, what's going on, man?
Not much. Just got off the air and just kind of waiting to get some sports back. To be honest with you, it's I'm getting more and more excited about what looks like it's coming down the road, but it's we're also running out of topics on a daily radio show for 4 hours every day. So it's been interesting, but it looks like it's getting better soon.
What have you guys been primarily talking about?
I mean, I consider Birmingham to be the best college football market in the country. So most of what we're doing is college football based. A lot of our conversation has been what ifs around the college football world. Are we going to have a season? If we do have a season, what's it going to look like? Fans in the stands, how testing is going to be implemented. A lot of discussion about when these players do come back, what are their workouts going to be? How much time do they actually need? And then I think we roll that into sort of X's and O's and then team breakdowns of maybe who has some advantages not being with their strength coaches or not being able to go through spring ball, how it's going to change what we see throughout the course of the season. But we're talking Alabama, Auburn, SEC football every day. And then obviously we'll talk the NBA season. We'll talk Major League Baseball season or lack thereof and what's going to happen with other sports. We mix everything in, but we're SEC/college football heavy on three-man front in Birmingham.
So, Cole, I'm assuming that your show won't be as affected as most local and national shows this fall when there's NBA going up against football and really the election, which I think is going to hurt every single sports talk show.
Yeah, I have been on the air doing sports talk radio before when that happens. The one benefit that you get is revenue. I have sold in radio before. It's something that I hope I never have to do again. But that's one thing that you'll hear. A lot of people, they'll say, well, the political ads are coming back, and that's election year means more revenue for sports talk radio because the political ads are going to be there, and you get a lot of back and forth, and so that usually is going to help generate more money for a radio station. But we have a news talk station that's a sister station of ours, and every fall he always walks down the last Friday before the season kicks off, and he'll say, well, I just signed off to my listeners, and he spends a segment literally saying goodbye to a section of his listeners on News Talk Radio because he knows when college football begins, they're going over to sports talk radio, and they're not going to be with him anymore. You're right about an election. That keeps a lot of those people around, especially as polarizing as it looks like this year's election is going to be. So would not surprise me if things are a little bit more difficult. I don't think it affects us. I think it just gives us a way to talk about more things. I mean, if you're going to have the Masters on a college football weekend, if you're going to have the NBA Finals with college football, with the NFL, with PGA and NHL, that just gives us a way to sort of pick and choose the topics that we're a little bit more passionate about or that we view as more entertaining that we can spend more time with on the air.
Yeah, so I never thought about this. I don't think a lot of people probably know it. So you're saying that an election year can actually help local radio shows?
I think from a revenue perspective.
For revenues.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're seeing this everywhere on social media right now. Stick to sports. We obviously addressed the Drew Brees situation today, and I immediately, boom, 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 4 or 5 people tweeting at me telling me they didn't like what I was saying. So you still have to address certain things that are taking place, and I still think you have to have discussions about what's going on. It's not like my show, the three of us are going to be breaking down the election or talking about what candidate won a certain debate or why have they not spent more time on certain topics. We're not going that route. But from an ad revenue perspective, I think it helps almost every sports talk station because a lot of the voters, that demographic that they want, 18 to 35, 18 to 54, are listening to sports talk radio at that point in the calendar year. So it's valuable to get your ads going to that station. So I think most sports talk stations across the country would see a little bit of spike in revenue in an election year.
You said that people were telling you to stick to sports. I don't know if the sports audience really wants their commentators to stick to sports. I think some evidence proves that, but I think it also shows they don't want to hear just one side. I think that the media has really done a poor job of representing what a lot of America thinks. I think a lot of times they just say, well, this is what one side wants to hear. Do you really think that people just don't want to hear their radio hosts and television hosts touch on any of these topics, whether it be socially or politically?
Well, let's be honest. There's a lot of people out there, Bobby, that just want to be mad. They want to find something to be pissed off about. That's just whether we're talking about who should be starting at quarterback for Alabama this year, or if we're talking about something that's happened with the upcoming election. They want to be mad at somebody, so they're going to be able to find that. And then I think too, a lot of people just they want to be. Sports talk radio is different from what I have seen in my experience. It's much more. The relationship between the host and listeners becomes much closer. It's much more. There's a bigger bond there. I don't see a lot of news talk guys. I don't see a lot of music DJs when they have an event, have the amount of people come out and look forward to talking to them the way that they do. And I've done sports talk radio in a couple different towns now. And every time we do a remote, every time we do a live event, people come out and they want to talk to me. They want to talk to my two co-hosts. They want to talk to the three co-hosts on our morning show. Because they just feel like they connect by talking about things that they're so passionate about in their life. And I do think sports is an escape for a lot of people. So that's why that connection is a little more fun or a little more loose. Whereas when you move to a more serious topic, I think that's where people, if you're not in line with what they're saying, then things change a little bit. And that's when all of a sudden maybe the anger comes out or people get a little bit more frustrated. And when you get to those topics, people just want you to be in line with what they believe. And they have a hard time sometimes opening their mind and seeing things from both sides. That's the most valuable lesson that I've learned in my entire life. Was my mother early on said, always do yourself justice to look at things from both sides. No matter how passionate you are about something, no matter how sure you are about something, no matter how right you think you are about something, at least just look at the other side of it and then make your decision and go. And I think when you get to more serious topics, people have dug in a little bit deeper and they're more entrenched and they don't want to budge off of those. Whereas I can sit there and talk to an Alabama fan and tell him why his offensive line's not great. Or I can tell an Auburn fan why, because you only have one go-to receiver, your offense is not going to be able to take off. And they might be okay backing off of that topic a little bit. They'll say, oh, yeah, you might be right. The more serious the topics get, I think people are a little bit more hesitant to walk away and back off and find different ways to agree with you.
Yeah, and that advice that your mom gave you, nobody follows that anymore. I just was tweeting about it now. We've gotten to a place more so than ever where we're not allowed to disagree with what most people online think or most people in the media. If you disagree with what one side or the other side thinks, they want you gone, Cole. They want you canceled. Sure. They don't want to hear it. We can't have debate anymore because people don't want to debate. People just want to hear why they are right, whatever it is, whether if they have facts to back it up or if they're just saying it anecdotally. People make their statements, then work backward with facts. They don't use facts, then develop their opinion. They develop an opinion, then after that, they'll go and find some numbers that they can support whatever they're trying to say. That's a problem on so many different levels.
I think the first aspect of that is feelings and emotions. And we have a hard time separating feelings and emotions from a discussion in an educated, informative, maybe even helpful discussion. And that's tough for us in all aspects of life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's raising our children, whether it's dealing with people at work. And then I think the second part, and this is probably even more important, why that's so difficult in today's day and age is context. And I think it's that simple, Bobby. I really do. I think context matters. And on Twitter and on Instagram and in text messages, you lose context or you create your own context. I'm as guilty of that as anybody. I'll see somebody tweet something at me and I think they're being a smartass. And all of a sudden I pop off back on Twitter or I say something and I get defensive about it or I let it bother me. And then that person's responding an hour or two later saying, oh, no, hey, man, I actually agreed with you, but I thought that I should tell you that I knew about this. Or I just wanted to add to it by saying that. And then, of course, I feel like a jerk because I jumped to a conclusion. So I think the lack of context in a lot of our discussions, because let's be honest, a Twitter back and forth is not a discussion. It's just, it's not. That's people typing words and putting it out there for other people to see. And then anyone can react to it however they want. A discussion is what you and I are doing right now. And I don't think text messages are discussions. I mean, that's just basically discretionary words that you're trying to put in order, and you're offering it to somebody, and they can make out of it whatever they want. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but how many of us have read like I've read thousands of texts from my wife and thought she was all kind of mad at me. And then she'll say, well, no, I was just asking you if you could take the trash out, or would you stop by the store and pick this up for me? So I think a lack of context, or us creating our own context, because there's no one there to really deliver it to us. They're just putting it out there for us to take onto ourselves. I think that causes a lot of problems with what you're referencing, because we make things whatever we want them to be. If you and I are face to face at a bar or at a table having dinner or at a park bench, and we're having some of that discourse that you're referencing, if we're debating something, if we're going Jordan, LeBron, and we are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum, we're going to be able to have that conversation, probably stand up, air five, fist bump, whatever it is nowadays, and walk away and be happy with each other. If you and I have 150 tweets back and forth, or even a text message back and forth, it's not going to be as a friendly goodbye once that discussion is over, because we're taking so much as to what we see it as opposed to what you meant it as. And I just don't think, if it's not interpersonal, you're not able to grasp that context that people are trying to add into discussions.
Yeah, I would add to that as well is that Twitter and social media, Facebook, Instagram, they reward winners for debates now based on retweets and follows, and who lost the most followers probably lost that debate. That does not settle a debate, Cole. Like you said, you and I are having a conversation. We can learn from each other. We can push back. You can't do that online because everything is so black or white, A or B. There's no middle ground. You're only rewarded on Twitter if you come with a strong opinion that you're all in on, and you're going to back that up regardless of what developments come up. Social media has probably made us all dumber, because the only way for us to get smarter and better understand each other is to listen, debate, and learn. You can't do that now because you have to be married to your take or your opinion on something, because that's the only way you're going to get any attention online. Because if you're in the middle and say, well, I don't know, I want to learn more, you're going to be lost in the pack early.
Oh, God forbid you back off something.
Yeah.
I mean, God forbid someone gives you good information and you actually change your opinion or alter your opinion. And then what are people on social media going to do? They're going to attack. Where that is essentially you admitting that you may have learned something, and you admitting somewhat of a mistake, or just that your opinion may not have been originally what you thought, and you're going to get attacked for that. So that's why I think people marry themselves to their opinions, or marry themselves to what they believe or think they believe or want to believe, is just because there's that fear of, if I back off this at all, then the Twitter mob's coming after me, and they don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it, but that's where the mute button comes in, and you just start hammering that mute button left and right.
Imagine if a mechanic was working on your car and they originally said this needs to be fixed. Then through the process, they figured out, hey, I can save you a lot of money, get your car up and running based on this new information. Could you imagine saying, nope, you said a couple days ago you were going to do this. I don't care if there's more information. That's where we are right now. New developments aren't factored into any argument because things change. You can't back off things anymore. You have to be so all in. And Cole, honestly, a lot of people probably can't develop an opinion as fast as they are. I mean, all these topics that people get fired up about and engaged about, they take a lot of time to really speak from an informative perspective. I mean, even as simple as any political story, you can't just read one article and go online and think you're an expert. It takes a long time, and you should be constantly changing your perspective if new information sways you one way or another. But now that's not allowed.
Well, and it's one of the reasons that I love doing radio every day, is because television is fantastic. I love covering games. It's as close as I'll ever be to reliving that environment as a college football player, is to be on the sideline or be in the booth and calling live action. It's just, there's nothing like it. But radio every day allows you to have some of these conversations. Now, they're not all friendly, and it's difficult sometimes to have callers change your opinion or me change their opinion, or even that between my hosts, but it gives you the opportunity to do it every day. And even though it's not always face to face, I think it's more so than if we were going back and forth on Twitter or on Facebook or anything like that. And there are a lot of young people coming up that ask me for advice and ask me, okay, I'm trying to get into radio, I'm trying to get into media. Give me the one word of advice or one phrase of advice, and especially as it pertains to radio. But I think this really goes across all forms of media, is you better be okay admitting when you're wrong.
Yeah.
And when you're okay being able to do that, then you're going to be able to find a pretty decent future, because there are so many people, like you mentioned earlier, that are going to marry themselves to one thing or one thought process or one idea or one ideology, and then never be able to get away from it, that so many people are going to cancel them out. I'll tell you a great story is the station that I'm on now. Ian Fitzsimmons, who's with ESPN Radio now, he and Lance Taylor were hosting a show on WJOX in Birmingham. Lance Taylor is on the morning show in Jocks now on the Roundtable. And Lance and I went to the same high school. We've known each other for a long time. And so they asked me to kind of come in and be their Auburn guide, come on once a week. And there was a trip that I made onto that show a few years before, and it was close to signing day, and we were talking about a signing class, and this linebacker from Decatur, Alabama came up. And my brother's high school football team had gone to Decatur, Alabama to play this team. And Rolando McClain was the linebacker's name. And they asked me what I thought about him. Well, in that game, it was late, and they were getting beat, and he walked off the field. And so my opinion of him at that time was, I saw him, what I perceived to be, quit in a game and have a bad attitude in a game. And from the other things that I had heard, I thought that would be problematic for him at Alabama. So I went on the air then and said, I don't expect him to be an immediate impact guy at Alabama. Well, 2-3 years later, I'm back on this same radio show, and this guy calls in. And he said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about Rolando McClain, and you said he wasn't going to be no good, and you was wrong. And I had not been, now keep in mind, I'm not a host at this point. I'm just a guest. I'm every now and then guest. And I honestly, I sat there for a second, and I said to myself, the only way to handle this is just to face it and to admit it. And so I just said on air, I said, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. And I completely whiffed on Rolando McClain. He has been an outstanding college football player. He looks like he's going to be a great NFL player. And he's done nothing but be productive down there. And that was a swing and a miss on my part. That same guy has called into other shows that I've been on and still brings that up to this day and said that he wasn't a fan of mine before, but obviously the fact that I was able to just admit that I was wrong then, he was able to sort of come around and realize, okay, this guy might know what he's talking about. At least he can admit when he's wrong. But so many people can't do that, won't do that, don't want to do that. Again, because I think it's because of that fear of getting attacked. I don't mind being wrong. And the reason that I don't mind being wrong is because I do so much work to assure that I'm right. And I know I'm not going to be all the time. But I know I've done the work to most likely be right with the things that I'm going to take a strong stance on or be passionate about. Now, most of the things that I'm passionate about are which defensive line is great, which offensive guard should be taken first in the draft, why a team's going to be good, not going to be good, so on and so forth. But it's like my friend, I had a buddy of mine a while back, Kevin Weidel. He's a scout with the Eagles now, or with the Ravens, and he worked with me at the SEC Network. And he told me, Cole, your work will always present itself. Never forget that. Your work will present itself. And I've never forgotten that. And I think it's an amazing quote, because if you put the work in and you do your due diligence, you almost can't be wrong, because you're basing what you're saying and what you believe and your projections and your thoughts on homework and research that you've done. Therefore, it's very difficult to be wrong at that point, because you've gathered the information. Now, you may present it in a bad way, or you may have an opinion on some of those facts that a lot of people don't agree with, but it's tough to just be flat out wrong when you've done your work. And that's what I kind of try to pride myself on, is that my work will present itself. And if I don't know about something, I'm going to tell you I don't know about it. So I think if you can kind of just live by that, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble.
Digitally podcasting, live video, has replaced some of the need for radio. Some people say it's the new way to consume content as opposed to listening in your car or on your tractor to radio. But the one thing that you can't replace is what you were just talking about.
Did you just say on your tractor?
Oh yeah. People listening to radio
Oh
on their
my
track is a
God.
very common thing now,
That's
Cole.
amazing. I love it. Yeah.
But you can't replace those lengthy discussions because online you have to get everything in, and I don't know what it is, 280 characters now, or you have to get everything in a 2-minute clip, or try to pull a highlight. Even if you're on TV, you might have 2 minutes to talk. You have to get your thoughts out quickly. You can't go into your deep thoughts. Radio is the one platform that allows you to do that.
And I don't think a lot of people, Bobby, understand or know just how much editing can take place in a podcast. And I don't have a podcast. I've tried one. It didn't go the way that I thought. I would love to get back into that space. I want to be in that space. I plan to find a way to get into that space. But the part that you mentioned of, number one, things that can go bad, not knowing exactly what's going to happen, the fact that you can't edit it, that live conversation, I don't think can ever truly be replaced by a podcast. Now, there are other avenues that we're seeing people go, and we're seeing people get very creative to this, whether it's Instagram Live. You see like what McAfee's doing by having his show now on YouTube Live. Right. You can do different things like that. Like Pat has taken a whole different world, and Clay's done a great job with this too, with Periscope, of there are these other entities that I can use to push my message out. And people will flock to those areas and those things. But I still think there's a ton of value in terrestrial radio. When our generation is about to be gone, that may change because so many people won't view it as the norm. And how are we even going to be getting to and from work at that point? I mean, we might be able to sit there and flip through our phone and look at Twitter the entire ride to work by that time. But for now, for so many people that still get in their car and still are out doing sales every day and going office to office or door to door or restaurant to restaurant, they're turning their radio on. And I don't think that's going to go away still for a long time. And the part about it that is always live, and there's always an unknown factor, and it can always change directions quickly, especially with what's happening right now. I mean, when I listen to a podcast, very rarely was it recorded 30 minutes before I listened to it. So the fact that we're on radio,
sometimes days.
Yeah, all of a sudden, we were on the air. I don't know why this popped into my brain when Terrell Lewis's ACL at Alabama was announced last year. Like, we were in the middle of our show. Well, boom, we shift our entire show, and we're talking about Terrell Lewis. Then we're talking about Alabama's defensive front. Then we're talking about Alabama's defense. Then we're talking about him coming back. Does he enter the draft? I mean, all of those things begin to roll because we're live and we're on the air, and we can call those audibles while we're doing our show. There's a lot of value in that because people want to know what's going on right now.
What was your reaction to Joe Rogan's reported $100 million deal with Spotify? To me, that absolutely was a sign that podcasts are officially here. Not just that people are listening, but there's money into them, money that probably no radio host alive can get right now outside of maybe Howard Stern, but I don't even know if he's getting that type of money right now. That to me, that was a big step. Not saying radio is going to die. I don't think it is. I think that there's always going to be a place for it. There's a lot of shows that are still really good, but to me, that was a pendulum swing.
I think it would be safe for you to say Howard Stern money when you're talking about that deal. I was glad for Joe. I'm a fan of Joe Rogan. I'm a fan, and I think that what's so great about Joe is how versatile he is, and he should be a great example for people in media. My executive producer in Birmingham is Pat Smith. He helped formulate the Paul Feinbaum show. He's Paul's producer for a long time. And the one point that he constantly hammers home to me is create value for yourself. And it can't just be in front of that microphone, whether it's doing videos in front of a camera, whether it's calling games on the side, working for different entities, doing social media. You've got to find ways to create value. So now you're talking about a guy that is one of the best comedians that we have. You could argue he's the best podcaster on the planet right now.
Oh, no question.
And then I think he's the best UFC color man that there is as well. So you got three giant entities that he's dominated, all three of those. Not to mention he's been in movies, he's been in TV shows, all the other things that he's dabbled in, but he's dominated three huge mediums. And that versatility has allowed the other parts of what he does to grow. Let's not forget the fact that he's an amazing interviewer. And that has helped him propel to be where he is and to get that deal. There are not many people, and I've been to the Swarovski class up at ESPN. And it opened my eyes as to how difficult quality interviewing actually is and what needs to go into it and how you should do it. And that's one reason that I love his show. I love to interview people. So I love to hear how people ask questions, why people ask questions. And the real thing that I love, and this goes back to what we're talking about in the beginning of the show, is I love to hear people actually listening. Because a great interviewer listens and can find other questions within the answers that are given. And when you follow up and you dig and you can pull things out, because everyone gives you more answers inside their answer. But if you have the time, I think the true value is being able to go find what the real answers were inside of the answers that they give you. Because nobody's just giving you everything right off the bat. We're just, as human beings, that's not who we are. So Joe's amazing. I think that you say podcasts are here. I think for maybe the general public, yes, that was a big signifier that podcasts are here. But Conrad Thompson's a good friend of mine, so trust me, I've known the value of podcasts for a long time. I mean, the dude does like 11 wrestling podcasts. They're all great. They're all successful. They're all dominant. And speaking of those other avenues, I mean, whether it's T-shirts or, behind some paywall, I don't even know what he calls it, some website where he gives VIP access and they get the podcast 2 days early. And he's doing live events where people are coming out. Like, it's all like McAfee, Rogan, Conrad Thompson, Clay Travis. They're all finding these different ways to bring more viewers, more listeners in. And it's like you said, I don't know if it's just going to go to podcasts, but I think it's going to continue to disperse out to all of those different areas.
You are 100% right about the interviewing aspect of media. Most go into this industry thinking it's the easiest thing to do compared to rants, debates, and thought-provoking thoughts. It's actually probably the hardest to do well. Now, it's the simplest to do decently because anybody can talk to someone, do a Q&A, write down some questions ahead of time, but those aren't good interviewers. Very few, Cole, in the history of broadcasting have done interviewing at a high level. Stern, Larry King, now Rogan. There's a big drop-off after that. I don't even know who would be fourth because I think it's a long fall after those three. And I don't know if anybody in sports has mastered it right now. Dan Patrick is looked at as the top interviewer in the business. I'm fine with that. He probably is. But there's a lot of room there for a lot of broadcasters in sports because nobody's been able to figure out how to do it on that level. And it might be something that's not going to be figured out for a while yet.
Do we have enough? Let me ask you a question. Do we have enough long-form interview platforms in sports to really know that? Because I agree with you on Dan Patrick. I think Dan's amazing. I think Tom Rinaldi's amazing. But if Tom Rinaldi's doing an interview for Game Day, how much the actual interview are we getting? We're not getting that in long form. Right. Even some of the E60 interviews that we see from, say, a Jeremy Schaap, who's a wonderful interviewer, we're not getting all of it. So I wonder, maybe is there a bigger market than we realize for long-form sports interviews, for somebody to just get in there like Stern does or like Joe does on his podcast, and it might go 45 minutes. It might go 2 hours and 45 minutes, but just go with it. And I don't know if we have enough people like that. And it's hard in terrestrial radio because you have stop sets, you have breaks. You can't just go for an hour and a half if that's where the interview is taking you. So, and obviously that's one of the most popular sports mediums, and it makes it tough to really dig in, dive in, and go for that long-form interview. That's what I would love to do. I would love to be able to sit down with people in sports and say, all right, we've got an hour and a half, 2 hours. I want to know about your life, your career. I want to know why you did this big moment. I think I would love to do it, but you're right. I mean, try being a guy on the sideline that gets two questions, right, or one question. You got one question for a half of football, 30 minutes of football. You get one question, and I'm fortunate because I have people that work behind me like Steve Ackles he'll call me out like that and say, "What was that?" or "That was terrible." And I hate hearing it, I hate seeing it, but I want that constructive criticism, and he does it because he knows I can be better. And so you have to challenge yourself to, one, find something that's going to be relevant to the viewers, so it can't be all football nerd stuff that only I know about. Two, something that you're probably going to get a good answer on, and that's where my mind really begins to just twirl. When I get down to a minute and a half, 2 minutes, a minute 15 left in the half, and I know which coach I'm going to go interview, the main thing that I'm thinking about at that point in time is what's going to give me the best answer. Because there might be a play that I can ask about, or there might be an official that caused a problem on a call but you're probably not getting a good answer on that. So I got to try to find something that's relevant to the broadcast that the fans are going to want to know about, that I also believe I'm going to get an answer on. If it's a coach that I know is not going to comment on officials or is not going to comment on how his quarterback's playing, there's no point in me asking that question. You can say, you got to ask it. You have to ask it. Well, if I know Nick Saban's not going to give me an answer, why do I ask him that? It's pointless. Like, yeah, okay, we might get a viral reaction, but I want to get a good answer. And I want something that the people are going to be able to hear and apply to what they saw in the game that brings value to the broadcast.
Do you worry about where we are in media right now with so many different shows, local, national, podcasts, blogs, websites, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, that people in the media won't be able to get as big as some of the stars right now? I'll say it, Cole, I don't know if someone in sports TV is ever going to get as big as Stephen A. is right now. In the SEC, there probably will never be a personality as influential as Paul Feinbaum. I don't know if there's going to be a radio host that can do it like Colin Cowherd. Things are so fragmented now. The world is so big. That's the concern that I think I would tell a lot of people. Do you agree?
I think your point is fair, and I agree with most of it. But I don't know if we should be concerned that a certain level of celebrity cannot be achieved.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so like I'm not satisfied with where I am, and by any stretch of the imagination, I want bigger and better games that I want to call. I want to have more radio that I'm able to do. I want to be on more radio stations. I want to do more things as far as, like I said earlier, being able to interview people. I want to move into the podcast space. So I have goals and aspirations, but if I'm only judging my career based on can I measure myself next to Paul Feinbaum or Stephen A. Smith or Colin Cowherd, then what if I do it in different ways? Right. What I do think it allows you to do is be more specific. And I don't think that where I think you're accurate is that I don't know if general popularity is going to be able to be as big, but I think specific popularity can be bigger. So I think a college football analyst can be bigger, or I think an NBA analyst can be bigger, or an NFL analyst can be bigger than maybe the next biggest NFL analyst that we've seen. But because there is so much more to take in, that just automatically means that fewer people are going to be able to consume what everybody's doing. So is there going to be another Paul Feinbaum? I doubt it. Like, I would love to be that guy in Birmingham one day. I mean, I would love to be the voice of SEC football, of college football, in drive time in Birmingham, Alabama, and be viewed as that. But does that mean I'm going to get an opportunity to have a television show to go with the radio show, with the launch of a conference network, the biggest launch of a station in cable history? That opportunity is probably not going to rise again. So, right. And is there going to be another debate show that I'm given the ability to sit in on that platform and then show my personality the way that a Stephen A. Smith did, and then when I do get to show it, absolutely crush it on a regular basis, and then be able to propel to where he is? I don't know if those opportunities are going to be there. So, but what I do think it allows more people to maybe reach level B or C plus. Yes, fewer people A plus, but I think a lot more people can now get to B minus, B plus than ever before. Having more platforms is great. It's opportunity. That's all it is. So I think having more platforms and more opportunity is great for everybody, because it's no different than a football team. That's competition. So if some college football analyst comes out there and he starts to do his stuff on Twitch or YouTube TV or YouTube Live or whatever it is, or a podcast, even though I'm on terrestrial radio and I'm on the SEC Network or ESPN, it's still competition for me, because I want to be better than that guy. I want to be better than Greg McElroy. I want to be better than Jordan Rodgers. I want to be better than Dan Orlovsky. That's not that it gets any of them. It's just they all want to be better than me, and they should. So I think the more people who have opportunities to show what they can do should raise the game of everybody else involved.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It's probably been no worse time to be a star than right now if you're not a star yet. But there's never been a better time to get on the level you just talked about, that C plus B range. Hey, Cole, I appreciate you coming on. I want to have you on again. That was fantastic. You brought all sorts of different insights. Thanks a lot, man.
No, thanks for having me, man. I enjoyed it. And anytime you need me, just let me know.